You're live. Hello. Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of We'll Tell You What We're Reading from the Waltham Public Library. Once again, my colleagues and I are taking our show on the virtual road as we tell you about some of the titles that we've been reading and enjoying, or not. Although actually this time I'm not sure there are any nots. We'll see. If you have titles that you're also enjoying or not, please let us know by including them in the chat if you're watching us live, or comments if you're watching us on demand. You may request these titles for contactless pickup. Many of these titles are also available through our subscriptions to Overdrive, which you can view on the Libby app, or Hoopla. My name is Laura Bernheim, and I'm the head of reference at the Waltham Public Library. Joining me are my colleagues Greg Carter, Louise Goldstein, Amber Harvey, and Liz Rior. I'm also joined by my sidekick here, Batgirl, aka Barbara Gordon. Bit of trivia for you. Did you know that Barbara Gordon's day job is being the librarian of the Gotham City Library? That's right, we have our own superhero who just fell over. There you go, Batgirl. We look forward to sharing our titles with you, that is the non-superheroes in the group. But before we do, I'd like to share some news about what's going on at the library. As always, we are available virtually 24/7 through our website, walthampubliclibrary.org, link below in the description, and on the phone Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4 at 781-314-3425, or by email at waltham@midlib.net. A lot of options there. We are also available for whole pickup Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4. We have several events and programs happening. Our children's staff is running multiple story times and other activities on Facebook Live through the Waltham Public Library Children's Activity Group in our Facebook page. In addition, they are hosting some story times as well as concerts and arts and science activities on Zoom. Our technology, teen, and English language learning departments are running classes and activities on Zoom as well. Please visit the library website and click on events calendar for more information, as well as who to contact for Zoom links. Our book clubs are also meeting virtually. Our upcoming meetings are Saturday, October 17th at 10 a.m. And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie is the book for that meeting. That ebook is always available through our subscription to Hoopla. Monday, October 19th at 7 p.m. We'll be discussing I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. The ebook and the audiobook are always available through our subscription to Hoopla. On Thursday, October 22nd at 7 p.m., we will be discussing The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Until October 22nd, Waltham residents can download either the ebook or audiobook through Overdrive or the Libby app without any waiting. And that's great because there's a huge waiting list for that. On Monday, October 26th at 7 p.m., we are having Tell Us What You're Reading. You can visit our website in the event calendar for the Zoom link, or you can email me at lbernheim@midlib.net for any of these Zoom links. And again, October 22nd, I think I misspoke. I said there was a waiting list. That waiting list doesn't matter for Britt Bennett, The Vanishing Half. You can get it without a waiting list on Overdrive right now. Coming up on our YouTube channel are the following events. On October 7th at 7 p.m., we're having a program in both English and Spanish, How to Vote, featuring Genoveva Tavara of Watch CDC and Annette Reynolds of the League of Women Voters. On October 14th at 7 p.m., we'll be having a lecture on the power of protest images in the Black freedom struggle. On October 21st at 2:30, our third episode of We'll Tell You What We're Reading. And October 28th at 7 p.m., Race and Childbirth in America. You can stream those programs live, or you can view them anytime after the event. Modern technology, so cool. And frankly, I wouldn't be earning my keep as a YouTube content creator if I didn't tell you to subscribe to the Waltham Public Library channel. You can get updates about any of our content, including the next episode. That's right, our third. Did I say third? I said third of this show. What are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell. I don't know if we have a bell, but we definitely have a subscribe button. Unlike other YouTube content creators, however, I'm not going to tell you to go visit Skillshare or HelloFresh or one of the many, 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 many other YouTube sponsors. There is no need because we have such awesome friends here. If you're able, I really would like to encourage you to support our friends of the Waltham Public Library. Our friends group is responsible for so many wonderful things at the library, including our Library Museum Pass program, of which we are able to offer some right now, arts and crafts supplies for our youth services programs, including our Zoom youth services programs, speaker fees for outside performers, and our library Zoom account, which has allowed us to continue our programming since April. You can join the Friends as an individual for $10 or $20 for an entire family, no matter how many people are in your family. You can find out more about our friends by clicking on Library Friends on our website. I've included the link in, everybody say it with me now, the description below. Okay, that's enough of my introduction. We all know why you're really here. Without further ado, we're going to tell you what we've been reading, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Liz.
Hello, everybody. I am going to share my screen and get that moving. Yes, start from the beginning, please. Okay, all right, so I'm going to be talking about 5 titles today. I have 2 recent titles, 2 older titles, and then a recent children's title. And I enjoyed all of them. So Laura, so far so good, only books that we like. So my first title is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. This short novel from the author of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell focuses on Piranesi, though that might not actually be his name, who inhabits a house with thousands and thousands of grand rooms and halls. The only others who live in the house, which is also the entire world, are a bunch of birds and the mysterious other, who is a scientist and explorer in search of great and dark knowledge, or great and forbidden knowledge, I think, excuse me. So the story is told through Piranesi's journals, in which he documents his exploration of the house, catalogs the endless marble statues, and chronicles the tides which sleep through the upper floors of the house from the flooded basement, which contains an ocean. When signs of a mysterious third person in the house start popping up, Piranesi's world is turned upside down, and it just goes off the rails, but in like a really good way. So this book is a lovely short read for fans of fantasy and mythology. If you like Neil Gaiman, I think you'd really enjoy this book. It has a real Neil Gaiman-y feel to it. I read it in 2 days and I loved it. It was fantastic. My next title is a little different. It is Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert. So this is a romance novel, which is not a genre that I usually read. This particular romance novel focuses on my chosen people, which are the nerds. So I kind of wanted to see how a nerd romance would be written. So Conrad and Alden are competitive players of a card game called Odyssey. Think Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, or Pokemon cards or something like that, basically. And they are both attending the world's biggest Odyssey convention, thanks to their involvement in a popular YouTube channel. On the line is winning a spot in the Pro Tour and a lot of money and fame and prestige in this gaming community. So Conrad is an asthmatic but charismatic, popular, and very handsome Midwestern boy who is secretly dealing with some serious family issues. Alden is a brilliant Jewish boy from New Jersey, guarded and competitive, and is also struggling with balancing his neurodiverse brain and finding his place in the world. They are bitter rivals. They each think the other hates them. So as they drive cross country to go to this convention, they go from bitter enemies to kind of friends, and then something a little more, and it's really sweet. It's a really uplifting and diverse romance novel that would be great for fans of nerd culture, Ready Player One, or even if you just like road trips, because they stop at all these weird road trip locations. It's also wonderful to read about a romance novel that's not just man-woman. It is two men. They are neurodiverse. There's some health issues. It's really refreshing. My next title is The Good House by Tananarive Due. This is a horror novel, which is my usual genre. So it stars Angela. Angela is a divorced lawyer and mother who's struggling to rebuild her life and find peace after her son, Corey, commits suicide. She returns to the site of Corey's death, her family's ancestral home in the Pacific Northwest. Angela's grandmother, who lived in the house previously, was a well-known nurse, healer, and practitioner of voodoo in her community. When Angela returns to the house with her friend and client, Naomi, she begins to realize that there is a supernatural connection between the house, her grandmother, and the death of her son. This is a long read, and it did take me a while to get through, but I personally found the ending to be a little unsatisfying, but it is still a very written well book that focuses on family, magic, sort of passing down generational trauma, and is also written by women of color, and authors of color are super underrepresented in literature in general, particularly in horror fiction. It's getting a lot of attention now thanks to people like Jordan Peele, but there have been Black authors writing fantastic horror books and doing horror films for a long time. So this is from, I think, 2006 maybe. If you like The Haunting of Hill House, you would probably enjoy this story. It's a terrifying story of what a mother must do to unravel both her family's history and her son's death. And I really enjoyed it, minus the ending, but other than that. My next title is Dune by Frank Herbert. This is my favorite book of all time. I have read it probably 14 or 15 times, and I'm currently rereading it because there is a new film adaptation coming out starring your Aunt Sheila's favorite hot young Hollywood heartthrob, Timothée Chalamet. So Dune is an epic science fiction, political, thriller, religious. There's a lot going on. It is so good though. I come back to it every year and just keep reading it and reading it. My copy is from when I was a teenager and it's falling apart. There have been some adaptations of it already. There's the infamous David Lynch adaptation, which is certainly a movie. And then there's also the Sci-Fi Channel's miniseries adaptation, which is certainly a miniseries. So I'm really excited to see how Denis Villeneuve, I believe is how you say his last name, tackles this seminal piece of science fiction. And there's also a lot of sequels to Dune. You can skip them. And then my last title is children's book, relatively recent. It's Beware the Flurkin by Calliope Glass. This is a children's picture book about Captain Marvel. So a few years ago, the Captain Marvel movie came out, and Captain Marvel has a pet cat with what appears to be a cat named Goose. In the Captain Marvel comics, the cat's name is actually Chewie, but they named it Goose in the film. So this is telling the story of Captain Marvel through the eyes of Goose, who is a flurkin, which, for lack of a better description, is basically a cat-like creature that has tentacles and can slurp objects into like an infinite interdimensional space inside of them. You know, like super regular, normal cat stuff. It's really cute. It brings together a lot of the characters from the movie. It's very straightforward. I feel like even if you or your child hadn't seen Captain Marvel or weren't familiar with the Captain Marvel comics or movie, you would still enjoy it because it's essentially about a cat that eats giant things and then throws them up. And what kid doesn't like puke jokes? I love them and I'm 33. So those are my books. I'm going to turn it now over to my colleague, Amber.
story, tough act to follow. I keep hearing Flurkin rhymes with Birkin from the Trolls. So anyway, that's what I was thinking when I saw the title. I have 4 books to talk about today, and one of them, let me start to share my screen here. One of them I didn't love, but I don't like to give bad reviews, so I will let you guess which one that was. Let me go to the beginning. We are starting with Emma Straub, All Adults Here. There's going to be a big clue in my first sentence here of which one, if this is the one I didn't like. But let me start by saying I was in love with this book by page 6. It's set in a fictional town in upstate New York, which actually reminded me a lot of Cape Town. Barbara Baker has just been hit and killed in a pedestrian accident involving a thankfully empty school bus. Astrid Strick, an acquaintance of Barbara's, witnesses the accident, which serves as the impetus for her to make changes in her life, beginning with opening up to her children, her adult children, that she's in a romantic relationship with a woman. All Adults Here is light on the surface, but it touches on many issues we can all relate to. Most importantly, the book asks, and I think answers the question, is it ever too late to become the person we want to be? I highly recommend this book. The second book is Crooked Hallelujah by Kelly Jo Ford. This novel and stories tells the multi-generational story of 4 Cherokee women beginning in the 60s, early 70s, and up through the present day. Each chapter is told from a different perspective, as the book follows the characters chronologically, and it alternates between Cherokee territory in Oklahoma and Texas. The beginning of the book focuses primarily on Renee, Justine, and Lula. But later in the book, we dive deeper into the stories of characters who have made appearances earlier in the story. The last chapter in the book ends with an apocalyptic chapter that 6 months ago may have seemed nearly unbelievable. But after 6 months of living in a global pandemic, I think it rings eerily true. This book is Miss Ford's debut, and I hope we see more of her in the future. My third book is titled Conviction by Denise Mina. Denise Mina is a Scottish crime writer and author of several series that are set in Glasgow. Conviction is a standalone novel and has a little bit of everything. The novel begins one morning and we meet Anna MacDonald. She wakes early before her husband and kids are awake and relishes listening to true crime podcasts while the house is quiet. On this particular morning, Anna is beginning a new series about a private yacht that exploded and went down carrying only a father and his 2 children. When the father's name is mentioned, Anna is stunned to discover that she'd been friends with the man several years ago. Anna's listening is interrupted by the doorbell ringing, signaling her best friend has arrived to collect Anna for their hot yoga class. But instead of being dressed for yoga, Estelle arrives with luggage and the announcement that she and Anna's husband are running away together and taking the kids. After Estelle and the husband leave for Portugal with the kids, Estelle's anorexic rock star husband arrives. Anna offers to take him home, but realizes he's too weak to be left alone, so takes him with her on her trek to find answers to what really happened to her friend and the sinking of the yacht. If it seems as though I've shared too much, let me assure you, all of this happens within the first 2 chapters. This book is a story within a story within a story, or maybe I should say a story within a podcast within a story, and has a little bit of everything. There's mystery, a bit of thriller, dark humor, even a bit of the supernatural. Conviction was a pick for Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine Book Club, and I was not surprised to learn that the novel is being developed for television. And the last book that I want to talk about is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I couldn't put this book down. My Dark Vanessa is a dark story about a relationship between a student and her teacher that begins when Vanessa is 15. Given the nature of the story, it feels wrong to say I enjoyed it, but I think it's incredibly well written. It's heavy-hitting and relevant book. The story alternates between 2017, when Vanessa is a 30-something adult working as a hotel concierge in Portland, and the year 2000, when Vanessa was a 15-year-old student at boarding school. After rumors circulate about the relationship between Vanessa and her English teacher, Jacob Strain, Vanessa is forced to leave school after she lies and says that Strain had done nothing wrong. It had all been fiction. Set in the height of the Me Too movement, present-day Vanessa finds herself being asked to come forward to admit that she'd been abused. And there are other women who had been abused by Strain that are trying to encourage Vanessa to come forward. Vanessa maintains that she was different than the other girls because she'd not been abused, they'd been in love. There's a scene where Vanessa is starting to open up to her therapist about her past, and Vanessa says, I just really need it to be a love story, because if it isn't a love story, then what is it? It gives you shivers. My Dark Vanessa was initially chosen as an Oprah book club pick, but was dropped after the controversy following Oprah's selection of American Dirt. Obviously, it's a tough story to read. Some of the scenes with Vanessa and Strain are quite explicit, but definitely one that needs to be told. And with that, I will turn things over to my colleague, Greg.
Thank you. All right, let's get this set up. Bear with me one moment, folks. And play. There we go. So the books that I read for, I've been reading a few, namely science fiction and fantasy and horror, as that's my usual jam, especially now that we're getting closer and closer to my favorite month, October. The first book that I am sharing is An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. I read this for my science fiction and fantasy book club. Long story short, it is the book is essentially about the world, the apocalypse has happened, the world has become unlivable for humans, and what aspects of humanity that were able to survive went into a generational spaceship that is supposedly looking for another planet to, that is hospitable for humans. But it's going to be a long trek, like thousands of years. So in the meantime, all of this has happened. Humanity is pretty much, the Matilda, the ship that everybody's living on, has pretty much been reduced into a society similar to the antebellum south of the United States, where the upper class, people who are Caucasian, live in luxury, and the lower classes, people of color, live in squalor and poverty and often abuse. And the story focuses around this woman by the name of Esther, a person who lives on the lower decks, who's also a gifted surgeon. And she finds out that her mother, who she thought committed suicide about 2 decades ago, might not have. And her death and the issues surrounding it might actually have a connection to the sovereign of the ship, or king, who has just recently died. And it's about her story trying to find out what's going on, as well as getting help from a gifted surgeon named Theo, who is who's a person from the upper deck, who is also the result of a mixed parentage. It's a beautifully written book. I think there are so many wonderful elements about it. And I really like River Solomon's writing. What's really great about it too is that there are many heroic, intelligent characters who are people of color, who are non-binary, who are autistic, something that that you often find difficulty reading about in science fiction. I think we are, as Liz pointed out, I think we're beginning to correct this, and that's wonderful. If you're looking for a book that is science fiction that's escapism, though, this might not be the one. This is probably one of the most heart-wrenching books I've ever read in the past couple of years. There's just religious zealotry, there is assault, there is human cruelty at its worst, and but it's not done in a way that I think is gratuitous or objectifying. It is done in a way that this is something that people have to deal with, and it's not shy about it, which I think is important. But it's not a long book, and it took me a long time to read it because I had to take a number of breaks. But again, I think it's a very well-written and important book for science fiction, and ultimately I'm glad I read it. The next book I read was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. It's a horror novel. It's a very strange horror novel. It's written, it's pretty much about a number of friends who are Indigenous Americans, and they are, and about 10 years ago, they went on a hunting trip, and they were looking for elk, and they couldn't find it. And then they noticed that some elk were going into territory that was not reserved for hunting. It was only reserved for, if elk were living there, they get to live unless they were being hunted by like the town elders. And so they go in there, they hunt, and something awful happens, and they all promise each other that they're never going to talk about it again. Flash forward 10 years to the present day, something that they thought was dead isn't, and it's crawling its way back from death to hunt them down and make them pay. Suffice to say, it is, if you're thinking that it's similar to the plot of I Know What You Did Last Summer, then yes, Stephen Graham Jones has described his book as a Native American slasher movie book. And it is, but I would say, unlike the 80s slasher movies, well, most of them, I would say that this one has, it's a very thoughtful and provocative book. It is very strange. There's a lot of it, like An Unkindness of Ghosts, that deals with a lot of tragic issues, racism, particularly geared towards the main characters who are like from the Blackfeet Nation. Concepts of feeling like if you leave the reservation, whether or not you've betrayed it. Also, family issues such as divorce and other such things. But it also has a very bit of gallows humor to it as well, which gives it a little bit of levity. And it also raises a number of questions pertaining to when is revenge ever justified, or whether or not, even if you have the right to vengeance, are you just continuing a cycle of trauma that's not going to end until you relinquish your rights to it? And I think it's a very dark tale, but that does not shy away from brutality. But I would also say there are moments of levity and light, and I really liked it. It is very strange, though. There are many points that I was reading this book, and I was like, so that happened. Didn't expect that coming out of the fridge, but there you go. I think it's beautiful. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was something very different. And if we're talking about horror, because that's what I'm continuing with it, going on full on Halloween craze, I went from something new to something very, very old, and decided to read Dracula by Bram Stoker, because I realized I like vampires, but I have not read like Dracula, and I read Dracula, but I have not read like Dracula the book in 20 years. And so, everybody knows about vampires, and it's like, but it got to the point where it's like, do I actually know the story? And I read it, and for those of you who don't know what the plot of Dracula is, it's about this man by the name of Jonathan Harker, and he decides that he's going to sell some real estate to this gentleman by the name of Count Dracula in Transylvania. he decides, oh, it's a nice castle, despite all the village people telling him, don't go to the castle, especially at night. Maybe you should have a crucifix if you really have to. And just encountering and just dealing with the realization that his host is in fact a vampire, and he probably is going to eat him when he's done with the real estate. I'm surprised on how great the atmosphere is in a lot of aspects of it. The beginning is really awesome because I feel like reading this, because this story is done as journal entries. So I don't think Hollywood is ever going to be able to give this book true justice, because you cannot, like, I don't see how you're going to be able to suit that to another form of media. There's a lot of the story beginning is incredibly creepy. The more and more you, like, Jonathan's realization of his scenario and how trapped it is in his situation is quite terrifying. There are some moments that in the middle where I kind of got a little frustrated, because it was just pretty much people writing to each other about Victorian society. I'm pretty sure Bram Stoker never met an American during his time when he was writing, because every American character that he has in this are pretty much talking about cattle, or making a reference to cattle or a metaphor to cattle. And it's just, I guess we really like cows, which I can't argue. That's cool, I guess. But the parts that made me roll my eyes there were a few of them, but when he's getting to the character of the Count himself, I think he does a fantastic job. And I'm surprised on how chilled I was by some of it, because vampires don't really freak me out. And my last book, speaking of vampires, is my favorite vampire book, Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Hands down, this is, I've read this several times, read it about 2 years ago. I tend to read it like every Halloween. It is, I think it's King's best work. King for me is kind of hit or miss. I either love his books or I hate his books. Like Salem's Lot, loved it. It did not. But this one, as I said, I feel is his best piece of literature. Premise goes is that when King read the story goes is that when King read Dracula, he thought it was kind of silly that if Dracula came to America, he'd probably end up in New York and get hit by a bus. And that would really be the end of the story. But apparently King's wife said, well, what if he went to a small town in New England? It would probably be a very different story. And so that's what happens. It focuses on this writer by the name of Ben Marsters, who comes back to his town of Salems Lot in Maine. And he's having a good time revisiting all of his old haunts. While this all happens, though, a person by the name of Shrek buys a mansion on the top of the hill, and every night people start to disappear. So you can probably see where this is going. But what's really cool about it is that it's a gradual, the horror element of it is how much people are in denial of when something really bad is happening. Because a couple people disappear, people don't tend to talk about it. A number of people disappear, people still don't talk about it. When it becomes apparent that something really, really wrong is there, people are so far in denial that they refuse to acknowledge it until it's too late, which I think still has some levity in this day and age, because there's a line in here that says, no matter how awful the noises that were going outside were, there's something far worse: to look the Gorgon in the face. It is, I mean, it's a long book, but I read through it in a couple days. I think there's a lot of parts that are terrifying, eerie, and I really haven't seen a vampire novel done in a way that I found generally creepy. And that's including Dracula. So props to King on that. Very, very well written. On that fine note, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Louise.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen with you. Hold on one sec. And let me just back it up. All right. So I wanted to begin with Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's by Gail Honeyman. And as you can see in my notes, I find this book to be rather funny, hysterically funny at times. Our main character, Eleanor, it's told through her voice. And she had a difficult, isolated childhood with an abusive mother and foster homes where she really wasn't cared for. And so she's kind of learned to be self-sufficient and sort of keep to herself. But she has a job and she goes every day from 8:30 to 5:30. And she has a particular dinner that she'll eat pretty much every night. And on weekends, she likes to drink vodka and just kind of keep to herself and then back to work. But there's a bit of a change because somebody she works with, Raymond, who's like the IT guy, and he's kind of scruffy and casual, and she's always kind of criticizing him in her mind and not out loud, and he smokes, and she criticizes him mentally, and she's hilarious. Actually, she's hilarious. The language is beautiful. They see a man fall down in the street, an older man named Sammy, and they start to sort of tend to this man. And so Eleanor and Raymond begin to interact, and she starts to form some connections. On the other hand, she finds out about a rock star and thinks, oh, we were meant to be. She's never met this guy in her life. She has no idea who he is, but it's like, we were meant to be. He's my love. And she has these conversations with her abusive mother on Wednesday evenings and tells her mother about it, and her mother gives her abusive advice. But she starts to come into her own. She starts to make some healthy connections. She begins to change, and it's lovely, it's quirky, it's hilarious. I do recommend this for fans of A Man Called Ov by Frederick Backman, because you have someone who's kind of starting off being a little bit of a curmudgeon, but really blossoming and coming into their own. And it's lovely. I can't recommend this enough. The next book I wanted to talk about is by Lisa Wingate, and it's called Before We Were Yours. I have never read Lisa Wingate before, but I am going to read her again. She's actually a terrific writer. This book is based on a true story. The WPA administration in the Roosevelt era, that's Franklin Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt started this program, which really happened. It was called the Pack Horse Librarian Program. And the librarians are in Kentucky, and they're just regular people, women, who volunteer to be librarians. There are many elements to this story because we have a woman who is our main character, and she is married to an abusive man with a very abusive, horrible father who's a corrupt businessman. I know none of us have ever heard of corrupt businessmen before, and very sexist, abusive father. We have some racism going on in Kentucky, and these women bond and ride on these pack horses and deliver books to people who maybe don't have any access to books because they're up in the middle of nowhere. And the librarians who have their own issues to deal with, such as our main character, Alice, who's married to this abusive man, they are all helping to get people books, and people are really benefiting from the books. I personally agree that people benefit from books. And oh, you guys, I am so sorry. I have the wrong screen up. Let me just switch that for you. I am so sorry. The book I'm talking about is The Giver of Stars with the Packhorse Librarians. A million apologies, by Jojo Moyes. Many apologies. Anyway, it's a terrific book. WPA Packhorse Librarians takes place in Kentucky, based on a real moment in history. It is romantic. It is lovely. This is Jojo Moyes. Many apologies, guys. But I love Lisa Wingate too, and we're going to get back to her. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let me get my screen back. So let me just get this to be full size. So the book that I was showing you, that I will talk about now, is Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. So this book is also based on a true story. And I want to just tell you a couple of things about that. We have Memphis in 1939. We have 4 siblings who are growing up on the Mississippi River in a shanty boat. And this horrible thing happened at that time. There was a woman named Georgia Tan, and the Tennessee Children's Home Society Orphanage, they would literally, this is very hard to believe, it's horrible and true, they would steal poor children and put them up for adoption in wealthy homes. Honestly happened, honestly horrible. It's just awful. And this woman, Aiken Avery, is in South Carolina in the present day, and she finds some clues that show, and she's from a well-to-do family, but she finds some clues to show that some of the members of her family may have been involved in this awful kidnapping scam. She finds some hints and she's trying to hunt it down. I had no idea this happened in history, but it did. It's awful. The book is lovely. I recommend it. 4 stars. And then my last book, this author, Naomi Reagan, I adore Naomi Reagan. I read everything by her. I have 2 or 3 more to go. This is her newest book. It's called An Unorthodox Match. And this is a good book to read now because it's romantic. It is beautifully written. It takes us into a religious community very different from where we are living, most of us. It's in Borough Park, Brooklyn. And our main character, she grew up in California with a mother who was rather an atheist, agnostic type of person. And her daughter is originally named Lola, but after some real heartbreak in her life, a lover who died tragically, a company that turned out to be a swindling company that had a lying premise, and another boyfriend who cheated on her, she decides maybe to try a religious community. And she does. And she is babysitting for a man named Yaakov, or Jacob, and she's called a Baalat Shiva. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is what they call people who are coming in from the outside to a very religious Haredi community. And there's a lot of malicious gossip going on, because even religious people are human, and they gossip, and they tend to treat people who are coming from the, quote, outside as outsiders. But the problem is Leah and Yaakov are really falling in love, and Leah really is helping his family. And it's lovely. They have some obstacles to overcome. I really recommend this book. I couldn't put it down. I was upset when it was over, which is always a good sign for me about a book, when I'm like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? This book is over. Oh no. That's how it was for me. That's my last title, and I want to turn it over to, last but certainly not least, my esteemed colleague, Laura.
Thank you, Louise. I am just going to share my screen now. present. Here we go. All right. So my first book is Before the Ever After by Jacqueline Woodson. This is Woodson's latest book. It is brand new. It just came out this month. I started this book last night around 8 o'clock, and I almost finished it by the time I went to bed. It's the story of ZJ, little man, to his father. ZJ's father is suffering from long-term effects of the many concussions he received as a professional football player. Told in verse, like a great many of Woodson's novels, this is just a beautifully written, a very lyrical novel, very heart-wrenching. I really feel for ZJ and his parents as his father is trying to figure out what's happening to him. Most of the book takes place about 20 years ago, before the NFL was really exposed for covering up the dangers of head injuries. They knew about it, but really wasn't as known in the mainstream then. And the tone of the book is definitely quite melancholy, but it's also very sweet. Really just love seeing ZJ's relationship with his father. I mean, just if you look even at the cover, I mean, that's just such a beautiful image of a boy being carried on his father's shoulders. And it's just beautiful. I love Woodson's books. I just think she's such a gorgeous writer. Everything I've read by her, I've just adored. We were very lucky enough to host Jacqueline Woodson here at the library for an author talk in our children's room quite a few years ago. I forget exactly when it was, but it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And she was as wonderful as her writing. She was so gracious with everyone who asked questions, especially some very young children. It's probably one of my favorite programs we've had here. And it was just great to know that one of my favorite authors is awesome in real life. That doesn't always happen, and that was just, it was great. So Jacqueline Woodson, if you're watching this, you're probably not, you're awesome, and I love your books. My second book is a little bit less serious than previous. It's the graphic novel version, Logan Likes Marianne, by Gail Galligan, based on the original novel by Anna Martin. The Babysitters Club first premiered as a book series when I was a year younger in the title Babysitters, for that brief period of time when they were 12, before they turned 13 for 25 years. And now I'm old enough to be the mother of all the members, not just Jesse and Mallory, who are the junior members, but even Marianne and Dawn and the rest of them. As I mentioned in our last episode of this show, I was a big fan of the original books and have been really impressed with the recent TV adaptation on Netflix. In 2006, the original books were resurrected as a graphic novel series, adapting them for a new audience and making them a little bit less 1980s. These graphic novels introduced me to Raina Telgemeier, who has turned into one of my favorite graphic novel writers and artists. And she wrote the first 4 of the graphic novel series. There was then a 9-year lull, and then Gail Galligan took over the graphic novel series. And I think she's done a great job at capturing both the spirit of Raina Telgemeier and Anna Martin. That both of them, I think, are 2 really tough acts to follow in the children's literature world. And I think she does a very admirable job of it. She's also done a really good job at updating the books for our current day without making them seem dated. I don't think these will necessarily be dated in a few years. Maybe Marianne's outfit there, I don't know. But I personally, I like her outfit, so who cares? As for this title, I actually really liked it, to my surprise. When I was in middle school when the original Logan Likes Marianne came out, and I did not like it. It may have had something to do with the fact that Marianne and Logan looked like they were in their 30s on the book cover. I was gonna actually put a side-by-side image so you could see Marianne literally looks like she could be my contemporary on the original cover. It's ridiculous. She's supposed to be in 8th grade. Logan also in this book, I think, is a much more realized character in this version, and I really felt a blossoming attraction between them, but also a friendship, which is how it starts out. I thought in the original novels, I felt like Logan Bruno was more of a plot device than an actual character. BSC fans, feel free to ream me out for that, but I didn't dislike Logan, but I was not a fan. I really liked Logan in this book because he had a personality and was well realized as a character. It was great. Marianne's father likewise has a lot more layers in this than I thought in the original books. So in terms of updates to the series, I think I still prefer the new show, because I think they did such an awesome job. But I think these graphic novels are really a nice filler until we get a new season. And really, for someone I was such a fan of these books, I can't even begin to tell you. I could literally do a 4-hour YouTube on the Babysitters Club. Nobody would watch it. No one would. Why would you? But I could do it if I wanted to. And I'm really enjoying all these new adaptations. My third book is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. We read this for a recent meeting of our virtual book club just last week, as a matter of fact. And this book was really intense in a good way. Roy and Celestial are practically newlyweds and experiencing what seem to be typical bumps and bruises for early days of a marriage. Celestial has sort of a conflicted relationship with her mother-in-law, for example. But what happens, though, Roy is wrongfully convicted for rape and he's sentenced to 12 years. It's a crime he did not commit. He does eventually get released after 5 years. So he's still in prison for 5 years. During those 5 years, Celestial starts a relationship with her childhood friend, Andre. And when Roy gets released, all three really need to face the reality of their situation. That was a very simplified version of the plot, but I don't want to give too much away. I thought Jones did a great job at addressing so many issues, including how the justice system treats Black people, especially Black men, how loved ones of prisoners handle their situation, and really the different makeup of families. All the main characters had different family structures, and they all were great. And the book is narrated by Roy, Celestial, and Andre. And while I think a lesser writer could have made Celestial and Andre into unsympathetic characters because of their relationship, Jones does a great job of getting us to understand everyone's stance and situations. It's so nuanced with the three of them. Even characters that are minor characters that are less than sympathetic, such as Andre's father, who had walked out in the family, are extremely layered. There's one coincidence, plot contrivance that I won't spoil. It did take me out of the story, only briefly. And again, very minor, but very thoughtful novel. And I'm still thinking about it over a week later when I finished a week ago. My fourth book is The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I did it as an audiobook and read by Joe Borton, who is an amazing audiobook narrator. If I had never heard anything he had narrated before, and I now just want to find everything Joe Morton has narrated. This is Coates' first standard novel, pretty well known as a writer. He's written several nonfiction books, as well as he's a writer for The Atlantic. Probably most well known for Between the World and Me, the very powerful book. He's also credited for sort of doing a lot of graphic novels of Black Panther, the Marvel Comics superhero. The Water Dancer tells the story in first person of Hiram Walker, who is the son of an enslaved woman, Rose, who he barely remembers. He was conceived when the plantation owner of Loch Ness, where Rose was, where she was enslaved, she gets raped by the owner, and she becomes pregnant with Hiram. And then the Loch Ness's owner ends up selling Rose. At 12, Hiram becomes the personal servant for Maynard, the son of Loch Ness's owner, and technically Hiram's half-brother. After Maynard drowns, when his and Hiram's carriage falls in the water, Hiram discovers he has a power of conduction, which allows him to transport himself, thus saving him from the same drowning fate as Maynard. The skill becomes useful when Hiram becomes involved in the Underground Railroad. The writing is very dense and extremely descriptive. The writing is also just gorgeous. Because it was so dense, it sometimes was hard to listen to as an audiobook since it requires full attention. Not always easy for me to do with audiobooks, but Morton's narration really just made it so easy. I mean, it just really, what a beautiful novel read by a beautiful narrator. And my last book is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. This is just a fun romance about Jasmine and Ashton, a soap opera actor, that's Jasmine, and a telenovela actor, that's Ashton. They are co-starring in Carmen in Charge, a bilingual comedy airing on an unnamed streaming service. Jasmine is trying to change her public image after her rock star boyfriend publicly dumps her. I hate when that happens. And she gets trashed in social media and the tabloids. Ashton, meanwhile, is trying to maintain his privacy so tabloids don't discover he has a young son. I really just like Jasmine and Ashton, and the show within a show is a lot of fun. I actually wish it was real. I want to watch it, Carmen in Charge. It really has a strong sense of place in its geographical settings, but also in the world of television. I thought it was just a great look at behind the scenes of a TV show. This is a romance, so you totally know where this book is going to go, and I love romances, so I never care. But it was a lot of fun. So those are my books. I am going to turn this to gallery view now, so we can all talk and talk about some of the movies we liked. I just want to comment a little bit on what you guys said. Louise, Lisa Wingate, I don't know if anyone is aware, but Lisa Wingate co-wrote a nonfiction book about that scandal with the kidnapping of children before and after, which I have not read. Have you read that? I'm curious. Yeah, I read Before We Were Yours, but I haven't read Before and After, so I'm very curious about that. And we also got a comment in the chat that Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. Is one of our chatters mentioned that they're considering it for an organization he's involved in, considering it for their next book club meeting. So I think that's pretty cool. And Amber, I admire you for reading Dark Vanessa. I remember that book was coming out. I went to so many book buzzes at American Library Association and other conferences, and it sounded like such an intense book, and I thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I could read that. So that was impressive. And it sounds like you enjoyed it, or enjoyed maybe is.
It's hard to say that you enjoy it, but yes, I read it in a couple of days. It's 300 pages maybe, so it's not a small book, heavy, but it's just really well done. Yeah.
And then, and Greg, I just, I have not read Dracula either. I'm not a huge vampire person. I was still a young adult teen librarian when Twilight came out, and I didn't like it, sorry. I love that people read it and loved it, but it was not for me as a reader, which that's totally fine. But Dracula obviously is very different. So what made you read that after all these years? I'm curious.
Well, it's kind of funny. I was doing like, I'm going to be doing like a movie marathon of like horror movies and things like that, because Halloween, and again, Halloween nerd here. And somebody had brought up like, oh, are you going to see like the original like Dracula, like the movie Bela Lugosi? I'm like, yeah, I probably should. And then they said, have you read the book? And I said, yeah, I have, but I don't really remember anything about it. And then once I went down that rabbit hole, I was like, you know what? I'm going to read it. I'm a librarian. It's easy to find. Sure. And that's what caused it. So it's a very, again, it's interesting. It was interesting to read, and also like to see what everybody goes to as the motif for the vampire. It was fun.
And Liz, the Beware the Flurkin looks so adorable. I love Captain Marvel anyway, but since you brought up Dune, I love the way you described the original movie. Well, that was a movie. It has such a bad reputation. I'm curious, are you cautiously optimistic about the new one?
I am cautiously optimistic. I did watch the trailer and I was like, okay, all right, this is not horrible. I'm excited to see. They haven't announced who's playing the character of Fade, who's like a pretty big character, and the movie is being the book is being split into 2 films. So I will see it or rent it online probably, because I'm not going into any movie theaters anytime soon. But I don't know, I'm just really excited. My husband is reading it now because the movie is coming out, and he keeps being like, what is this? What does this mean? And who is that? And what is this thing? And I just feel so smart because I'm like, oh yeah, this character is the uncle of this person who does this thing. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm just excited. Even if it's terrible, I'm excited.
And Louise, I just have one more thing. Since you're our outreach librarian and you read the Jojo Moyes book, are you going to now start a new outreach service where we use horse? Are you going to start delivering home delivery on horseback?
Isn't that a great idea? I think so. You know, maybe I'll get a nice little horse and give him some hay. By the way, just a note about Eleanor Oliphant. It has been optioned for a movie, I guess. Reese Witherspoon would be one of the producers, I guess, with MGM. Just so you know, look for that. I don't know if it'll be as good as the book, though. That'll be tough.
Always is. It always is.
Yeah.
Cool. So who would like to share a movie or TV show they've been watching lately? Louise, go ahead. Yeah. You don't have to raise your hand. You could just.
I have to recommend this to anybody and everybody in the world. This is on Canopy, which the library has a subscription. I really like Canopy. This movie is hilarious. It's called Welcome to Me, and it's got Kristen Wiig, who used to be on Saturday Night Live back in the day. It's such a fun plot. I think it's fun. I tend to like quirky characters, part of why I loved Eleanor Oliphant so much. We have a quirky character here. She is hilarious. This woman, she's not working. She's on some kind of a mental health disability, and she has a psychiatrist who does a great job being a psychiatrist, and she's decided to stop her meds just because. She's going to go on a high protein diet and deal with things that way. In the meantime, every single day, she goes to this little store and buys a lottery ticket. And there are all these lottery tickets like all over her apartment, which is color coded too. She has like a yellow section, a blue section, a green section, because it makes her feel calmer, supposedly. So she's really, really quirky. She goes to, and oh, one other thing, she loves Oprah. She loves Oprah. And this is not a brand new movie, because she has a VHS cassette tape and she puts it in and Oprah's talking and she starts reciting with Oprah. She knows like every single word that Oprah's going to say. It's one of her idols. She watches TV like all day long. So she comes home one day, she opens up a yogurt. She likes yogurt. She's looking at the lottery ticket, pulling the numbers and everything. And she has every single number and she's won this huge amount of money, like $50 million or some crazy amount. So she calls the lottery thing and she's having trouble even talking. She's so like nervous. So then she gets all this money and she moves into a casino, and she has a hotel casino. And I'm not sure if that's in Las Vegas or not. She's either in Las Vegas or in California. But anyway, she moves in. She has a best friend. She decides she's going to start a TV show with her money. And the TV show is going to be about her. It's going to be called Welcome to Me. It's the name of her show. And they're asking her about the plot. Are you going to have guests? What are you going to do? She goes, no, it's going to be all about me. And she does a show. It's like all about her and her autobiography. And she'll be like talking to her mother on the phone. They'll show a picture of her mother talking. It's hilarious. It's quirky. It's delightful. I recommend it. I've watched it. Just true confessions. I've watched it 3 times. It's so funny.
That sounds really fun. And Kristen Wiig is she's a character, certainly. And it's good to know it's on Canopy. Thanks for the plug, by the way. That is a streaming service that we subscribe to at the library, so you can watch it for free. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
I do, if I can go.
You certainly can.
Okay, so the last time we did this program, I was doing a rewatch of all of the Paranormal Activity movies, which I finished, and thank God. I am now doing a rewatch of all of the Hellraiser films, of which there are 10. Sorry, my computer just had a little hiccup. Hellraiser, for those who are not familiar with it, is based off a short story by Clive Barker, a novella by Clive Barker called The Hellbound Heart. There have been 10 Hellraiser films. The first came out in 1987 and was written and directed by Clive Barker. The most recent Hellraiser film came out in 2018. It is Hellraiser Judgment, and it was written and directed by Gary Tunnicliffe. I have no idea who that is. So I remember going to the video rental store with my parents and seeing the Hellraiser covers and being so terrified of Pinhead, like just the thought of one having nails in your face, like, yikes, no thanks, I'm 7. I just scared me. And now I think Pinhead looks so cool. Like he's horrible and evil and tortures people, but like he looks so cool. And I'd only ever seen the first 2 Hellraiser films. So tonight I'll be watching Hellraiser 3, which is Hell on Earth, I do believe. Yes, directed by Anthony Hickox and written by Peter Atkins. And then hopefully over the course of the next week, I will watch all 8 remaining Hellraiser films. It's a big endeavor, but I am a professional.
Wow, I'm impressed. I feel like you and I, despite the fact we were both X-Files fans and both disliked the movie Cats, I feel like you and I movie-wise don't. Those movies freak me out. Like I cannot sit through. I remember the video as Amber was demonstrating their head, that image. Ooh, that scared me. Anyone else have anything they want to share? I have some stuff too, but I'm happy to let you go. Go ahead, Greg, yeah.
Let's see. Well, I also just wanted to say to Liz, you're going to have to tell me about the sequels of Hellraiser because I saw the first one and I saw it kind of at that age where I was beginning not to be terrified, but I still kind of was because I was like, he's kind of cool. And then all the horrible stuff happens. We also have the original novella here in the Waltham Public Library, The Hellbound Heart. A certain awesome librarian got it for us. I don't know who that is. So if anybody ever wants to, borrow it from us, where we have it. The 2 things that I have been watching, I guess, for a show, I rewatched The Mandalorian because I got into the hype of it when it first came out, and I was beginning to think, was I just getting into the Star Wars hype? Watched it again. It's a good show. It's a stand-up. It's a solid show. I feel like it's like a space western, just like like all the cool stuff, and it's not filled with a lot of stuff as opposed to the movies. My personal bias, no judgments on anybody else on that. Other than that, and God, I didn't mean to make this vampire themed, but I saw Near Dark with Bill Paxton in it. It's a movie from the 80s in all like its 80s glory. And I guess the reason I bring it up is that sadly, there's some sort of fight with the film rights going on. So you can't actually stream it. You can't get it from like any of the streaming communities, but a number of the Minuteman public libraries have a physical copy. It was a lot of fun to watch. And, rest in peace, Bill Paxton, but he does a great job. Yeah, that's what I got.
Liz, you also, did you watch The Mandalorian, right?
I'm still muted. Yes, I watched The Mandalorian, and every time the child came on the screen, everyone I was watching it with, we all collectively would just go, so cute. And yeah, I really liked it. I'm excited for season 2 to come out. I don't actually subscribe to Disney Plus, so I have to check out a Roku from the Waltham Public Library with a Disney Plus subscription, funded by Friends of the Waltham Public Library, I think. Sorry if I'm wrong about that.
No, you're right. That is funded by Waltham Library, or the city of Waltham, I think, actually. Yeah, I still haven't seen The Mandalorian, which is surprising for me. I do have Disney Plus. I got it to watch Frozen because I'm basic and love Frozen. I just love Frozen, and I've been rewatching The Simpsons, which is on Disney Plus since the Walt Disney Company now owns most of 20th Century or Fox Entertainment, which had the rights to The Simpsons. And so but I want to watch The Mandalorian. I think the child, or Baby Yoda, I know that's not its real name, is so adorable. I've watched so many YouTube videos that just splice all of Baby Yoda's scenes together. And I've heard it's really good. I mean, I said I love Star Wars. I completely dislike the prequels. Like most people my generation, I think, who grew up with the original movies. I liked the 3 recent movies better than the prequels. Rise of Skywalker was definitely my least favorite, but I did like Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. But I've heard The Mandalorian just it's very different, and I like the fact that it's still Star Wars and different. So I'm looking forward to watching it in 20 years when I finish The Simpsons rewatch, because that literally is 31 years of television to get through, and man, it's a lot.
One thing I really like about The Mandalorian is that, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it really reminds me of watching episodes of Hercules and Xena Warrior Princess on a very large TV in my parents' house as like a child after school. Like it just has that like adventure TV show feel to it with like sword fight. Oh, there's no swords really, but yeah.
There's a flamethrower.
Better than a sword.
Well, you had me at Xena, that's for sure. I didn't watch Hercules as much, but I love Xena. I used to watch that in college. She did that. I'm not going to do that yell on because I'm too embarrassed, but her call that she used to do. Great. Amber, do you have anything that you want to share?
Sure. I just finished a Netflix series, 6 episodes called Young Wallander. And you may remember it was I believe PBS or BBC. Kenneth Branagh was Wallander, based on the books by Henning Mankell a few years ago. And, I like detective shows and I like them dark, but Wallander was just a little too bleak for me. It's set he's Swedish and it's very gray and cold, and I couldn't get through Wallander. So now we have Young Wallander, and set in Sweden, but it features many of our favorite British actors. So some are Swedish, some of the words are in Swedish, but then there's a lot of British actors. If you can get past that, it's really good. We got about halfway through and I thought, wait a second, this is set in present day. And if this is Wallander as he's becoming a detective, this would be set in the 60s, 70s. So we did some research and they said, yes, this is not a period show. It just is as it is. So I was thinking of you actually, Laura, the prequel that no one wants, when you always say that. And it is a little bit like that. I think, we're running out of ideas for shows. So they just, let's go back to visit him as a, 20-something-year-old. But especially the first couple episodes are really atmospheric. The way they do the colors and the different scenes, the scenes in the police station are brown. When he goes out, it's dark, but there's, glimpses of neon lights in the background. It's just really well done. So that's that. I recommend that.
Cool, thank you. So I've been watching, speaking of Disney Plus, so I mentioned The Simpsons, which parts of it is aged really well and parts of it is aged horribly. I won't get too much into it, but I'm enjoying it. I'm now on what's the later seasons, which are not as good. I think I'm season 17. There's definitely, it's very uncomfortable, I think, to listen to the voices that some of the Hank Azaria voices. He voices quite a few characters of color, and I find that very hard to handle, and I'm ashamed that it took them a long time to finally realize that was not good. It should have never been accepted. But some of the other some of the storylines are really quite ahead of their time, especially the ones from like the early 90s. It's an interesting show. Like I do when I binge watch anything, I start dreaming about it, and that's not good. I really don't want to dream about Homer and Marge anymore. So and of course there's no rule I have to finish it, but I'm still enjoying it for the most part. They're strangely functional they're actually pretty functional, I think, as a family in some ways obviously not, and obviously they're cartoons, but it's it's been interesting because it's been on for so long. Watching the progression of time with it, I think, is kind of interesting cultural experience. But also, speaking of Disney Plus, I rewatched Black Panther recently, partly because I love it. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also because of the death of Chadwick Boseman, which far too soon. and it's hard to watch a little bit for that reason. But I loved it just watching it again. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's just such a great movie. I mean, it has a compelling villain. The acting is great. The women in it, I mean, awesome female characters. The whole cast is Black pretty much, which is awesome. It's in the director, you know, it's not like a white person directing a movie with people of color. Like it's just such a good movie. I really just, and it's fun. It's just a fun movie. It's sad to watch just because this young man very tragically died much too soon. But I did want to watch it again because of that. And I've watched, spoiler alert, I've been watching pretty much that one scene in Endgame where they come through the portal over and over and over again. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, and I'm sorry, I probably spoiled something, but oh, that scene. And talk about a rewatch, I just rewatched the movie Airplane, which totally dates myself. So that movie, I don't know if I want to say it aged well, because in a lot of ways it hasn't, but I still thought it was really funny. I don't know if that's something about me. I think what makes that movie work for people who aren't familiar with it, it's basically a complete remake of this very serious movie called 0 Hour. And it's almost the exact same script, except there's obviously humor added to it. And what makes the movie work is they take a lot of these actors who are known as these serious actors from the 60s and 70s and have them speak very deadpan in these roles. And that's what contributes to the humor. For those who don't know, that pretty much just restarted Leslie Nielsen's career as a comic actor. He was not known as one before. I mean, don't call me Shirley, everyone knows that line. I have to say, there's stuff that really hasn't aged well. There's definitely some aspects that make me cringe, but and the humor is just completely stupid, but I still just laughed a lot. The Ethel Merman, I don't want to give it away, but Ethel Merman's cameo in that movie is fantastic. Like, and I love that she went for it. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, I still got a chuckle out of it. I did a watch party with a friend who lives in California. I've been doing that during the pandemic, and we enjoyed it. So I decided, hey, since I loved rewatching Airplane, I should rewatch The Naked Gun, which I had not seen since out in the theater. That didn't age well at all. I did not enjoy it. Leslie Nielsen is still kind of funny as deadpan, but it's so problematic for so many reasons. I'm not even going to list. I barely laughed. It's very dated. I mean, Airplane is dated too, but I feel like The Naked Gun was very dated. And I remember laughing watching it, but I was also in 7th grade. So that was Airplane. I will watch it again. I'm embarrassed to say The Naked Gun, I will not. Just not a good movie. So the other two shows I'm watching the new season of the Great British Baking Show, or Great British Bake Off. I'm not going to say the number of the season because honestly, I have no idea what number it is. If you watch it on PBS, they use one numbering system. If you watch it in the UK, because it's one numbering system. And then if you watch on Netflix, they use it different. So whatever, it's season now. This is the second season in a row, I think, where we're getting it almost in real time, as opposed to several months or a year, or in some cases, the PBS 5 years later. We get it 3 days later. So they're showing it in real time, so you can't binge the current season. And this season, they actually filmed it during the pandemic. They had all the contestants live in a bubble. They had to quarantine. They could bring their families, but if they didn't bring their friends, they couldn't see them for the entire 7 weeks of the filming. But I love this show. I think it's the nicest reality show I've ever seen in my life. I'm not a reality show person, but this is just different. I used to love, the food they make is getting more ridiculous. Liz and I were actually talking earlier about the showstopper, and then the first episode where they had to make busts of heads, and they were all terrible. I mean, mine would be terrible too, but if anyone watches this episode, the Freddie Mercury one was amazing in a bad way, but I loved it. And her name was Laura, the woman who made that. And I just want to point out, for my birthday, Amber had bought me Star Baker that I wear on my lanyard at work. And of course, the end of each episode, there's a Star Baker. And what's great about this show too is when you win Star Baker for the whole series, you get a cake plate. That's it. I love that you just get a cake plate. It's amazing. I know there's other, and then quickly I'll say something that we can talk more about the Great British Bake Off. I'm watching Nadia's Time to Eat, which is on Netflix. Nadia she was from my favorite season. Again, don't ask me what number. I think it's real season 7 in the UK, but in the US, I literally have no idea what number they call it. I think she was on the second to last season that had Mary Berry and Mel and Sue. And she, Nadia Hussein is her full name. She got to make a cake for the Queen's 90-something birthday. And she's just great. And she has this show now called Nadia's Time to Eat, and it's basically recipes for busy people. And I really love it. It was a great follow-up to the first episode of the Great British Baking Show. And there's only, I think, 6 or 7 episodes, so I'm watching it very slowly because I don't want it to end. I know Liz and Amber and anyone else, I know you guys watched the Great British Baking Show. I know Liz, I know you've seen it. I don't know, Amber, if you've seen it yet.
I haven't started, and I'm glad that you said that they're doing it in somewhat real time, because I was thinking, oh, I don't have to hurry through it to get to the end, but I will now because I don't want the ending to be spoiled. But I'm curious how it is with the new host, because I'm a little bit not excited about that.
I think he's okay. Liz and I were talking about him earlier. I think, Liz, you were more familiar with him. I was familiar with him a little bit. He's had some cameo roles in various British movies and TV shows. I was just getting over Mel and Sue being gone, and I got really attached to Sandy, and now she's gone. And I realized if no one watches the Great British Baking Show, I realize no one knows what we're talking about. I apologize, but I liked him. I thought he has a sweetness to him, which I think you have to be a host on that show. So I liked him. I know Liz was a little bit less. Yeah, we were talking earlier. Before going on air, we were talking.
I think it's more that I liked Sandy so much too, and I liked her and I'm blanking on it. Is it Noel? I like
Noel Fielding.
Yes, they had a great camaraderie, so it would be hard to talk.
I think Matt and Noel, because yes, I'm on a first name basis with all these people. They seem to get along well. I mean, they're both comedians, so my guess is they maybe have cross paths. I think Mel and Sue, the original hosts, what would really work for them is, I don't know if people knew this, that they were like best friends in college that did a comedy act together. And I think that really, their chemistry was off the charts. I thought those two women, I still miss them. And they're not going to come back, I know, because of the whole BBC Channel 4 controversy, but I like him. Like I said, I think he was very sweet to people who were having trouble baking, and I just love that show so much. I think a pandemic is the perfect time to watch it. Louise and Greg, if you've never seen it, even if you're not a cook, I still recommend it, because you're not going to cook. This first episode, I was saying, because the crew normally gets to eat the food left over. I would not have wanted to be the crew on it. I would not have wanted to eat any of it. They use marzipan. I can't stand marzipan. They use marzipan, which some people love. Marzipan is not my thing. But yeah. Any other final movies, thoughts, TV shows before we sign off? Greg, were you gonna?
I was just going to say that I've not watched it a lot. My wife loves it, and there's a particular baker. I don't know if I'm getting. Her name was Helena, I think that she.
Oh, Helena Garcia, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you love her. You asked because she's very into spooky. All of her.
Yep, that's the one.
That very much up your and your wife's alley. I totally agree. And she and Noel had a real close. They developed a close friendship on the show. I don't know how real it was, but I follow her on Twitter, by the way, and she's hilarious on Twitter. I do say caution, if anyone does follow anyone associated with the Great British Bake Off on Twitter, Don't look at Twitter between Tuesday and Friday, because in the UK, they get the show on Tuesday and we get it on Friday. And I always get spoiled for who gets kicked off and who gets Star Baker, because one of the people I follow on Twitter, which I have to say is probably 50% of my Twitter people I follow are Great British Baking Show people. At least one of them spoils the name, which rightfully so. It's already aired in the UK. So, all right. Well, if no one has anything else to share, we're going to sign off. We have one comment about Airplane, that I should watch Big Bus. I guess I'm not familiar with that, but one of our chatters has recommended that I watch that if I liked Airplane. So I will look into that. Thank you. Please join us on October 21st. We will be back here on YouTube for We'll Tell You What We're Reading. Again, you can watch this episode immediately on demand. You can watch last month's episode is also on our YouTube channel, so you can watch that as well. We have a long conversation there about John Hughes movies and other books as well. And yeah, so thank you. So I'm going to end the live stream, and everyone has to wave on Zoom. So goodbye, Waltham. I can stop waving.